Latasha had barely touched her burger. Not that it mattered. Her attention had been locked on Dr. Dowdy the entire time. He wasn't holding together well. The tremors in his hands were worsening. His skin slick with sweat despite the cool air inside the restaurant. The worst part? His breathing. It came uneven now, like his body couldn't quite remember how to do something as simple as inhale. Before we dive deeper into the journey ahead, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stick with us. This story is just getting started. She tossed her napkin onto the tray, pushing her chair back.
We need to get you home.
Dr. Dowdy blinked sluggishly, his gaze unfocused. He nodded, but when he moved to stand, his legs betrayed him. His knees buckled slightly, forcing him to grip the table's edge. Latasha was there in an instant, her hand firm under his arm, steadying him.
Come on, doctor,
she murmured, voice calm despite the rising urgency in her chest.
We've got to move.
The walk to the apartment should have been easy. 10 minutes. But 10 minutes stretched unbearably long, when every step felt like a battle against gravity. Outside, the city hummed with life. Cars flashing past, voices merging in the late morning bustle. But for Dr. Dowdy, it was chaos. The movement, the noise, it all blurred together into something oppressive. Halfway there, he faltered, his breath hitched, his grip on her arm tightening. I can't, he wheezed, swallowing hard against the nausea curling in his gut. Latasha,
you can.
She interrupted, squeezing his wrist lightly.
Just a little further.
She didn't mention Freddie. Not yet. It wasn't that she didn't care. She cared too much. But Dr. Dowdy had to make it home first. That was a priority. When they finally reached the apartment building, Dr. Dowdy slumped against the doorway, exhaustion dragging him downward. Latasha guided him inside, maneuvering him toward the couch with deliberate efficiency. His breathing had steadied, but his skin was clammy, his expression etched with a deep, unspoken struggle. Latasha exhaled sharply, pressing a cool cloth against his forehead. Only then, only when he was situated, did she glance at her watch. Freddie was still waiting. Time was slipping away. She stood, rolling her shoulders, preparing herself for the next stretch of the day.
Rest,
she told Dr. Dowdy firmly.
You need it.
And then she grabbed her bag, tightening the strap. Freddie needed her, too. Latasha navigated the cracked sidewalk, her pace brisk but controlled. The city pulsed around them, cars humming, pedestrians lost in their own hurried worlds. But all she could focus on was a weight of responsibility pressing against her ribs. When she reached the clinic's entrance, a ripple of movement caught her eye, a cluster of familiar faces, worn and weary, waiting in quiet expectation. The homeless patients lingered outside, their routines thrown into disarray by Dr. Dowdy's absence. She knew what they saw. Their doctor was missing, and Latasha, the one steady presence they trusted, was walking past them without stopping. She exhaled sharply, weighing the precious seconds she had.
I'm sorry, but Dr. Dowdy is sick,
she announced, keeping her voice clear, firm. A murmur passed through the group, some nodding in quiet understanding, others stiffening with unease. A wiry man stepped forward, his eyes calculating.
Sick how?
Latasha met his gaze without hesitation.
Withdrawal.
No sugarcoating, no avoiding the truth. It landed like a stone dropped into deep water, some nodding knowingly, others shifting uncomfortably. Then, unexpectedly, a voice from the side broke the tension. Led a woman, gray-haired and wrapped in a tattered coat, spoke the words with quiet conviction. Let him rest. And just like that, the moment shifted. Latasha nodded grateful and wasted no more time. Inside the clinic, Freddie blinked at her with exhaustion, but there was relief in his expression. His wound was worse than she wanted to admit, but she didn't let it show. Quick, efficient, she did what had to be done. Checked his vitals, secured the IV, changed the dressing.
Figured no one was coming,
she said finally, already positioning the wheelchair for the journey back. He didn't argue. He rarely did. The walk back was agonizing. The weight of the chair slowed her pace, each block stretching unbearably. Sweat gathered at her brow, her mind flicking between Freddy's condition and Dr. Dowdy's worsening fever. Every step was a countdown.
We've got to move.
By the time she reached the apartment, she barely had the energy to knock the door open with her shoulder. Inside, Dr. Dowdy was worse. Freddy exhaled at the sight of him, shaking his head. Latasha didn't waste breath agreeing. She knelt beside Dr. Dowdy, pressing a cool cloth against his burning skin, steadying herself for the battle ahead. Latasha felt the weight of exhaustion in her limbs as she pressed the cloth against Dr. Dowdy's forehead. His fever hadn't broken yet, but at least he was still coherent. Barely. The tremors had settled for now, though his breath still came in uneven waves. Across the room, Freddy sat up in his wheelchair, more alert than he'd been in days. The antibiotics had done their job, pulling him back from the fevered abyss he'd been drowning in. Now, his sharp, street-earned knowledge could serve as a lifeline for Dr. Dowdy. He knew withdrawal. He'd seen it before. He'd lived it before. Latasha straightened, rolling the cloth in her hands. Freddy met her gaze, reading the concern etched in her face.
He's got it bad. You thinking about running back to McDonald's?
He asked, his tone knowing. She let out a breath, not quite a sigh, but close enough.
Would be easier.
She admitted, sinking onto the edge of the worn couch. She pressed her fingers against her temples, the doubts pressing in. She could have stayed there, could have kept her head down, managed the daily chaos of fast food orders instead of this mess of infection and withdrawal, of survival hinging on her ability to keep two men alive in a world that barely cared if they made it through the night. But then she looked at Dr. Dowdy, at the way his fingers twitched involuntarily, at the way his body fought to reclaim itself. And she looked at Freddy, bruised but upright, alive because she had done what needed to be done. She wasn't just managing anymore. She was needed. Freddy chuckled under his breath, shaking his head. He murmured, voice laced with something close to respect. She met his gaze, the weight in her chest settling into something grounded.
You're too deep in now, Nurse Latasha.
Yeah, I guess I am.
She said quietly, and that was enough. Latasha pressed the phone to her ear, pacing the worn carpet of the apartment. Dr. Dowdy shivered on the couch, his breath shallow, skin pale beneath the fevered sweat clinging to him. Freddy watched from his wheelchair, more alert than he'd been in days, but still too weak to do anything beyond observe. Billy picked up on the second ring.
Latasha.
His voice came sharp, expectant. She wasted no time.
Why?
I need you to come to the apartment.
A beat of silence. Then Billy's wary reply, slow and cautious. Latasha exhaled sharply, pressing her fingers to her temple.
It's Dr. Dowdy. He's in full-blown withdrawal. I can't leave him alone, but I need to grab some things from my place. Clothes, food. We also need Freddy's antibiotics. If you can stay for an hour, I can be back before Freddy needs his next dose.
Billy didn't answer immediately. She could hear the weight of the request settling into his shoulders, the quiet sound of him shifting wherever he was.
You're telling me I gotta babysit two sick old guys?
His tone carried a grumble, but not outright refusal.
Just for an hour.
Latasha pressed, keeping her voice steady, controlled.
I'll be quick.
Another pause. Then Billy sighed.
All right, but you owe me.
Relief washed through her, though she knew he grumbled the whole time.
I know.
Billy huffed.
I'll be there in 15.
Latasha ended the call, turning back toward the couch. Dr. Dowdy stirred, mumbling something unintelligible, and Freddy smirked slightly, reading the exhaustion in her expression.
He grumbling? Freddy asked. She huffed a tired laugh.
Of course.
Freddy nodded knowingly. He'll deal with it.
She hoped so, because once Billy got here, she had to move fast. Latasha sat stiffly on the edge of the couch, exhaustion threading deep into her bones. She needed to go, needed clothes, needed food, needed 5 minutes to herself. But Dr. Dowdy wasn't stable enough, and Freddie couldn't manage on his own. Billy had to get here first. She glanced at her watch, counting the minutes until his arrival, her fingers tapping absently against her knee. When a knock finally came at the door, she exhaled hard and pushed herself upright. Billy stepped inside, his expression immediately shifting into one of quiet disbelief. He took in the scene, the sweat-drenched Dr. Dowdy, the weary Freddie, the tension thick in the air.
Man,
He muttered, running a hand down his face.
you weren't kidding.
Latasha didn't waste time on pleasantries.
I need to grab some things from my place.
She said, already reaching for her bag.
Food's low, and Freddie needs antibiotics.
Billy grumbled, crossing his arms.
So, you're telling me I gotta sit here with these two?
Just for an hour.
Latasha insisted, tone firm but pleading.
I'll be back soon.
Billy sighed, casting a doubtful glance at Dr. Dowdy, who shifted weakly against the couch. He didn't sign up for this. But with another exhale, he resigned himself.
Fine. But you better hurry.
Latasha nodded, grateful, but didn't linger. If she stalled, Billy might change his mind. As she stepped out into the city air, she knew she'd be rushing the whole way. Billy could stay for an hour, no more, and that meant she had to make every second count. Latasha moved quickly, feet pounding against the sidewalk as she pushed forward to the late afternoon bustle. Every second counted. Billy's patience had a time limit, and Dr. Dowdy was not in good shape. She barely made it 2 blocks before a sharp, familiar voice cut through the air.
Why is the clinic closed?
Latasha almost kept walking. Almost. But stopping wasn't a choice. Miss Geraldine never let anyone escape unanswered. The elderly woman stood near a worn street bench, arms crossed over her thin frame, eyes sharp despite her 85 years. She already knew the answer. She just wanted to hear Latasha say it. Latasha exhaled, shifting her bag higher on her shoulder.
Dr. Dowdy is sick.
Miss Geraldine sniffed, unimpressed.
Withdrawal.
Latasha didn't confirm or deny, just waited. Ms. Geraldine huffed, shaking her head.
Drunkard's withdrawals. Told him not to pour out that good whiskey.
Latasha's patience had limits.
And with that, she kept moving, Ms. Geraldine's laughter following her down the street. Latasha barely had time to shut the door before Brenda's voice cut through the apartment.
Are you ever going to actually live here?
Latasha froze mid-step, her bag half unzipped as she shoved clothes inside. She didn't have time for this one either.
Brenda, not now.
Her roommate crossed her arms, standing near the kitchen, eyebrows raised.
Not now. That's all you ever say. You practically moved out without telling me.
Latasha exhaled sharply, shoving another shirt into her bag.
I'm busy, Brenda. Okay.
She muttered. Brenda scoffed.
Yeah, I got that. Your lovely ex came by the way. Mad as hell that you're never home. I told him I don't know where you are most of the time because I don't.
Latasha didn't even pause.
He can go jump in the lake.
I'd love to know what your problem is.
Latasha zipped the bag and slung it over her shoulder. She wasn't doing this. Not now,
I'll fill you in later.
she said, moving past Brenda, already heading for the door. Brenda huffed but didn't follow.
Yeah, sure. Later.
Latasha didn't look back. She couldn't. Billy's time was running out, and 2 men were waiting for her to keep them alive. Latasha gripped her bag tightly, her feet hitting the pavement in quick, determined strides. She had to move fast. Billy's patience had limits, and if he left early, Dr. Dowdy and Freddie would be completely alone. Her mind raced just as quickly as her legs. Each block felt longer than it should. The city around her blurred into background noise, just movement, lights, distant voices. She checked her watch. 25 minutes left. That was still enough time, if nothing slowed her down. Then, a misstep. She was moving too fast, her brain a step ahead of her body. She barely registered the curve before her foot landed wrong, sending her forward in a sharp jolt. She found herself on her face, skinned elbow, nothing more except embarrassment. But the sudden fall stole the breath from her chest. No time for mistakes. She forced herself forward, faster, pushing past the brief panic of fall. She couldn't afford to slow down. But even as she walked, her exhaustion started pressing in, making her hyper-aware of just how much she'd sacrificed for this. She didn't live here anymore. Not really. She had an apartment. But it wasn't home. Home was a fight. Freddie's wound, Dr. Dowdy's fever, the fragile pulse of the clinic's survival. Everything else, it barely mattered anymore. That thought settled heavy in her chest as she neared the last stretch. Almost there, she pictured Dr. Dowdy in that apartment, shaking, restless, barely holding together, and Freddie watching over him, knowing exactly what was coming next. She pictured Billy checking his watch, annoyed but present. She had to get back. Every second counted. Latasha pushed the door open with her shoulder, barely holding onto the strap of her bag as she stepped inside. She was spent. Billy looked up from his seat near the couch, taking her in for the first time. The tension in her shoulders, the exhaustion in her posture, the way she barely had the energy to set her bag down. He sighed, shaking his head.
You look bad.
Freddie snorted from his wheelchair.
She's been running herself ragged for us.
Billy's gaze flicked between the two men. Dr. Dowdy, still pale and fevered, Freddie, stable but worn, and Latasha, barely standing. Billy had said an hour. He'd promised his wife he wouldn't be gone long. But he couldn't leave, not yet.
I cleaned up a little.
He muttered, nodding toward the questionable version of tidied-up furniture.
At least, as much as a guy can clean.
Latasha blinked at the room, noticing it now for the first time. The papers stacked instead of scattered, the blankets folded instead of crumpled, the floor mostly free of random clutter. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Billy leaned back, arms crossed.
Have y'all even eaten?
Latasha hesitated. Had she eaten? She vaguely remembered her burger at McDonald's, untouched. And Freddie's? Never came. She shook her head.
No, didn't get the chance.
Billy exhaled sharply, pulling his phone from his pocket.
All right, I'm ordering food before I go.
He didn't even wait for permission, just started tapping through the delivery app. Latasha should have argued, but she didn't. She let him help, and for the first time in hours, she felt just a little less alone. Billy leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching Latasha as she unpacked a bag of clothes she brought from her apartment. She moved quickly, efficient in every gesture, but he could see the weight in her shoulders, the exhaustion in her posture.
This is your only job now?
He asked suddenly, cutting through the quiet. Latasha froze briefly, just for a second, before continuing.
Yeah.
She muttered.
McDonald's was just a job. This is nursing.
Billy exhaled, shaking his head. He hadn't thought about that. She wasn't just helping Dr. Dowdy out of goodwill. She had to be here. Had to make sure the doctor recovered. Had to keep Freddie stable. Had to get the clinic running again, because she needed it just as much as the people they served. Billy sighed and pulled his phone from his pocket. His wife would understand.
You'll get paid for this,
he said, no room for argument in his tone. Latasha hesitated again, barely, before nodding. She didn't have time to be grateful. She just had to keep going. Billy exhaled sharply, watching Latasha as she tucked her bag into the corner, already preparing to dive back into long stretch ahead. She was exhausted, but she wasn't breaking. Not yet. Without a word, he pulled a handful of bills from his wallet and set them on the table. Latasha blinked, staring at the money like it wasn't real.
That should cover you for a while,
Billy muttered, rubbing the back of his neck.
If it gets to be too much, call me.
Latasha didn't move. Billy sighed, shifting his weight.
Maybe I can find you a part-time helper, but it's your call.
She didn't argue, didn't refuse, just nodded, slow, measured. Billy studied her for a moment longer, then left, and the days grew long. Every morning blurred into the next, marked by Dr. Dowdy's fever breaking inch by inch, Freddy's antibiotics timed like clockwork, and Latasha moving through the motions, never stopping. She counted the hours in dressing changes and meals handed out, in restless nights filled with Dr. Dowdy's shaking breath and Freddy's quiet muttering. The weight of everything settled deeper, but she didn't call Billy. Not yet, because she could still handle it. Or at least, she was trying to. Freddy shifted slightly in his wheelchair, adjusting the blanket over his lap. Dr. Dowdy mumbled something incoherent from the couch, lost in his own battle against withdrawal. And Latasha? She sat at the kitchen table, staring at the handful of bills Billy had left. Her payment for doing this. It was the first time she had actually stopped. The exhaustion curled deep in her muscles, but more than that, the responsibility weighed heavier. This was her life now. But before we dive deeper into her fight, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Let us know what you think of this story. Let us improve and stay with us. The battle isn't over, and neither is the story. Join us in the next chapter as Latasha, Dr. Dowdy, and Freddy push forward one step at a time. She wasn't clocking into a shift and leaving when the hours ran out. She wasn't in some sterile hospital, detached from the people she was treating. This was raw, unfiltered survival, watching a man claw his way out of addiction, monitoring an infection that had nearly taken another man's leg. Keeping herself together because if she fell apart, who else was going to hold it all up? Latasha leaned forward, rubbing her temples. Stay tuned.